Baldur's Gate 3 is an amazing game, but has a big drop off in quality when you get to Act 3. And just so you know, I'm not a hater, I'm a super fan. And I have never played D&D before, never played a turn-based game before this. I just thought it looked cool and bought it. And then it completely took over my life for a few months. And I really wanted to love Act 3, but it ultimately let me down. While I did end up finishing the game on my first playthrough, on subsequent ones now I tend to just do a couple of things in Act 3 and then start a new character. So how does such an amazing game become so unmotivating to play in its final stretch? The purpose of this video is to analyze what went wrong and commiserate together. And yeah, I will be spoiling everything. First, let's take a look at what makes Act 1 and 2 so fun and engaging to play. If you recall in Act 1, one of the initial quests you receive is dealing with the goblins versus tieflings and druid situation. Here, the game doesn't make you side with one versus the other, it doesn't make you do anything at all. In fact, you can just leave, go to Act 2 through the Mountain Pass or the Grimforge if you want. Being a half-drow Dark Urge bard that is mutually hated by everyone but loves attention, I decided to make a distraction with a little tune while the goblins gathered around. Then I had Astarion sneak over to the punch bowl and drop in the wyvern toxin that we got from Nettie, the druid who casually asked us to use it on ourselves. Getting rid of a lot of the goblins this way, they were a little suspicious of me, but I assured them if I had actually spiked the punch bowl, why would I still be hanging around here? But being the villain of the story, I actually planned on selling out the druid's location to Mithara and helping her commit war crimes. Slay. But since I am a half-drow, she thinks I am a mudblood.
Half-drow, but a true soul. The Absolute's blessings may atone for the impurities of your blood.
So instead, I decide to still sell out the druid's location so I can lure her there and slaughter her warband myself. It is better this way because it is more dramatic, and I am all about the drama. Later, we celebrate with the tieflings at camp. Everyone in my party tries to hook up with me, and all is right in the world! When I'm in this part, it could feel like 15 minutes has gone by, but then I look and it's actually been 2 hours because I'm just so sucked in. And this is because the gameplay loops are so solid. Think of a gameplay loop as the design of the gameplay, and inside the loop is the certain actions that the player takes throughout the game. For example, Elden Ring has a lot of complexities to the fights that you have, to the builds that you can make, to even the lore. However, the core gameplay loop is quite simple. Most players spend most of their time exploring, fighting, looting, leveling up, and upgrading their gear. The gameplay loop stays the same throughout the game and through the DLC. Now, they make each aspect very interesting and engaging because the environments are gorgeous and very unique, the enemies are quite varied, and exploring is amazing. There are tons of things to find, and a lot of the loot is very useful, though not all of it. Since you level up by gaining runes from killing things or exploring, and since there is an unlimited level cap, there is always a reason to do anything in the game. And all of these things will help you in your ultimate quest of getting good and defeating the demigods. Baldur's Gate 3 is similar, but its gameplay loop has more steps than Elden Ring. From the start of the game, you are trying to figure out the mystery of who put tadpoles inside your head and why. The main mystery is a bigger long-term loop that you spend your time in Act 1 and 2 trying to figure out. A lot of the conversations you have with NPCs revolve around figuring out this mystery, and each one unpeels the onion a little bit more. The more moment-to-moment gameplay loops still include the ones similar to Elden Ring in which you explore, fight, loot, and level up, but leveling up here is a bit more intense than Elden Ring. Every time you do, there are multiple decisions to make on everyone in your party. There are classes, then there are subclasses, then there are subclasses on the subclasses, and there's like 300 spells to choose from, and then you can multiclass. It's a lot, but you really get to be creative and test out how you want your party to work. For example, when building Astarion, I went with a Thief subclass to get the extra bonus action, and then I usually put a couple of levels in Fighter to get an extra attack, and also a few into either Ranger or sometimes Paladin. I know Paladin doesn't totally jive with his story, but I choose Oath of Vengeance and he just becomes like a death machine. With Shadowheart, I change her domain from Trickery to Light or Tempest, or I might just change her overall to a Paladin and then change her back to a Cleric at level 5 so she can get the Spirit Guardians. How you build the characters is probably the most determining factor of how you do in combat, and one of the most important aspects of the game. As you're playing, you always have this short-term goal in mind of the next level and what you are going to choose when you reach the next level. And between Acts 1 and 2, your party becomes so much more powerful than they were when they started out, and it's so satisfying. The next loop in the game involves resource management. You and your party have a certain amount of spell slots per fight, so you have to be aware of how much you have left and when to take a long rest to replenish them. You also need to be on the lookout as you are exploring the world for supplies because you need them to take a long rest. Which leads into the next gameplay loop, the camp system and long rest events. So you know you need to take a long rest to recover health and replenish your spell slots. The game also uses this to propel the stories of your companions and the main mystery as well. There are a bunch of long rest scenes, particularly in Act 1, that are really fun and add so much flavor to the game. You really get to see the acting chops of the cast, and these scenes make the characters seem so real. This leads into the romance, which is what this game is probably most known for at this point.
What's this I've been hearing about you and Astarion? Don't get me wrong. I'd ride him to the Feywild and back if I had the chance, but I wouldn't let my guard down around him.
This loop involves talking to the characters, choosing between the dialogue options, and having your approval rating with them gain or lose points, and the game lets you know immediately.
Very good. Now just tell me I'm beautiful and we can call it a day. Observant. Mirrors aren't much use, but being reflected in someone else's eyes?
It's like a meme at this point to be so excited over that Astarion approves message, but that is a core part of the romance feedback loop. The last gameplay loop that I can think of is probably the most obvious, and that is making decisions in parts of the game and seeing the outcome of how it has played out. In the scenario I talked about earlier, if you had sided with Minthara and killed the tieflings, Karlach and Will leave your party, and Halsin will also not join you. However, you can now romance Minthara, but you were also locked out from further tiefling quests because you killed them all. There's also a couple ways to deal with other quests as well, like the Gur, Auntie Ethel, the Harpies, the Dweger, and the Grimforge, and also in Act 2 with Isabel, Yerger, and Balthasar. So all of these gameplay loops so naturally flow into one another, and they are all really fun. And this is why you can lose hours so easily and forget you are playing a game in the first place. So what the hell happens in Act 3, and how is it possible to lose all motivation to play? Well, basically, they've blown up their entire gameplay loop. I think this is most obviously seen because of the damn level cap. The game only lets you go up to level 12, and if you have been doing most of the side quests throughout the game, then you are going to reach level 12 quickly into Act 3. It's so detrimental from keeping you engaged to the end because the carrot on the stick is gone. What is the point of doing quests, having the same lackluster conversation with NPCs and doing the same fights over and over again if you're not going to get a reward out of it? I mean, for real, can you imagine if you got to the last third of Elden Ring and they wouldn't let you level up anymore? Or even Skyrim. Imagine if you were about to finish the main quest and... Just kidding, I know none of you finished the main quest, but the point is, they would never put a level cap in those games because it is so integral to the core gameplay loop. Remember, one of the core gameplay loops of Baldur's Gate is essentially explore, fight, loot, and level up. With this broken gameplay loop, the hefty amount of quests in Act 3 changes from this epic adventure where you and your party literally just slayed a god to a to-do list. And while you do still have to manage resources and have supplies that take a long rest after a fight, there really aren't that many long rest events to make it interesting. Like, we don't even get the companions celebrating killing the god Merkel. We don't even get them enjoying a drink together at the Elfsong Tavern. Karlach even talks about wanting to get a drink at the bar with everyone. She's going to die anyway, and we couldn't even get like one more happy moment with her. And another progression system that just kind of stops is the romance. While you may have opportunities to gain bits of approval here and there throughout the act, like at the circus, it's not enough to move the needle. Basically, whatever your relationship is with someone going into Act 3, that's it. The only kind of exception to this is with Astarion, because you can change the nature of your relationship with him depending on how you deal with Cazador, but you would have had to have been romancing him already. There's no romancing one main companion in Act 1 and 2 and then deciding to romance someone else in Act 3, except for Halsin, but his romance is pretty shallow. You just have to lift the shadow curse and he'll bang you. The only thing you can do with your romance is just fuck it up, but there's nothing to gain anymore, and that's the problem. It could have been really interesting to see how your relationship could have progressed with the person you were romancing into Act 3. And it could have been interesting if you were romancing someone, but then decided to start romancing someone else this far into the game. Think of the drama that could have ensued. But it's like, we don't even get the bare minimum of companion interactions anymore. And that is what added so much life and flavor to the game. A lot of the fun is making weird decisions and not only seeing how they will play out, but seeing how your party reacts to it and how they react to each other. Prior to Act 3, we got a lot of this.
So the tadpole allows us to influence others. How very interesting.
Don't get too excited. Influence comes at a cost. And until we know what that cost is, the only reasonable approach is a cautious one.
You have the ability to manipulate people, make them bend to your every whim, and you'd be cautious about it? That's no fun.
Ever since you were kind enough to free me from that stone, I've seen you demonstrate remarkable guile and courage. The way you stood in front of a crossbow to prevent a murder. The way you got Korga to release the girl. The way you got that boy out of a harpy's clutches. In short, I've grown to trust you.
What do we got here? Dead hoon walking, seems like. Got any reason I shouldn't sever your head and toss it to the Rothe?
Another belligerent dwarf? This is getting tiresome.
Free the drow, take his head, get out of here in one piece. Easy as 1, 2, 3.
There's the matter of the gnomes, too. It wouldn't do to stand by and keep them enslaved.
So, are we saving this Nier from suffocating or leaving him to die? I'm fine with either, naturally. The last thing I want to do is ruin these nails digging through rock. That's Oh, you're serious? Well, of course we can leave him. It's the easiest thing in the world. We just have to keep on walking.
But seeing now how characters react to big things, or really a lack of a reaction, just reiterates that nothing matters anymore. So the gameplay loop is completely broken in Act 3, but Baldur's Gate 3 really follows a story first and gameplay second design. So let's now take a look at the story at this point. The end of Act 2 built up so much momentum to the fight with Ketheric Thorm. You finally know the mystery of the Absolute and the Tadpoles, and you are ready to take him out. The Moonrise Towers fight is so good, and the last boss battle with Merkel is really well done. But this is also when the story and the gameplay both take a more linear turn. It kind of makes it seem like you might have a chance to help Ketheric turn his life around, but no, he jumps into the pit and you have to fight Merkel no matter what you've done. And it is a really fun fight, but this closes the major storyline of the whole game, and the story stops being about the mystery of the Absolute and about stopping the grand plan of the Dead Three. And you have already taken out one of them, so only Orin and Gortash to go. And I'm sorry, but they are incredibly lackluster villains. But it's time to go to Baldur's Gate because apparently their undead army marches at the direction of the giant brain that they control, which is controlled by the Crown of Karsus, of which they stole from Raphael's father. On the road to Baldur's Gate, you are attacked by the space fascists again, otherwise known as the Githyanki, and have to go to the astral plane to save your guardian. And guess what? Your guardian has been a mind flayer manipulating you this whole time. And there is no way to side with the Githyanki at this point. The game makes you save the mind flayer. All of these events, it's like you are just along for the ride. You making decisions is kind of over. It kind of does become Grand Theft Auto 5 in a way because there are no longer multiple solutions to a quest. There's only one solution from here on out, and it's whatever the game wants you to do. But hey, you'll make it to Rivington, just outside of Baldur's Gate, And the writers really couldn't stand having any mystery left on the bone with the story anymore. So if you play as the Dark Urge, they just reveal that to you as well. And you have a vision that you have been a ball spawn this whole time, so congratulations. Now you have the option to tell your companions about your revelation and see how much they don't care. My headcanon is that they've all discussed this and figured this out weeks ago. There's more to talk about with the mildly inconvenient urge, and don't worry, we'll get to it. So here we are, the last third of the game. The goal is to collect the Infinity Stones from Orin and Gortash and tie up any loose ends if you feel like it. And remember, if you have been doing a lot of the side quests, you are going to hit max level pretty soon, if you haven't already. And there is also no more meaningful progression with the romance. I don't think it's crazy to say that the main story is also objectively worse than it was. So what reasons do we even have to keep playing? I think it's clear that the devs knew that they took away a lot of the players' motivation to keep going. But instead of fixing these gameplay issues, they tried to manufacture a sense of urgency when there really isn't one, and they do this with Orin. You quickly find out that she is a shape changer, and then when confronting Gortash, she lets you know that Orin has infiltrated your party and is assuming someone's identity. Logically, if you were Orin and wanted to ruin Tav's life, wouldn't you take the person most important to them? That's what I would do. But Orin actually steals the person with your lowest approval. I don't know, is she trying to do us a favor? I mean, she literally knows who you are romancing because of the love test. I don't know why she wouldn't take that person. Except I do. Astarion has a quest, Shadowheart has a quest, Will has a quest, and Karlach has a big emotional scene. That leaves Minthara, Lae'zel, and Halsin. Gale actually does have a quest, but clearly the devs agreed it was so abysmal that they let Gale potentially get taken by Orin as well. The devs are trying to manufacture urgency, but they can't make it too urgent for the player because they want them to do the side content whenever they want. Anyway, since Orin will never take Astarion, I personally never feel the need to jump on this in what I consider is the main quest. And since she literally will take the person you have the lowest approval with, I assume most of you don't feel the need to jump on this immediately either. So the main mission is get the stones, save the city, get a boyfriend. Or get the stones, take over the world, get a boyfriend. Those are the two endings. The best part about this is, it kinda doesn't even matter what you've done throughout the game. You choose the ending in the final moment. There's only different variations in the last cutscene and epilogue with your companions based on what you have done with their individual quests, and I guess they use some kind of permutation of those different scenarios to get their 17,000 endings number they advertised. Or they just made it up, who knows. So the main story is a straight downgrade from what it was, and both the leveling and romance progression systems are over. But you know what else Act 3 has? Distractions and entertainment. They reverted to the oldest trick in the book, using sex to distract you from what is going on. Have you noticed all the weird sex scenes are in Act 3? The sex scenes in Act 1 and 2 are very cute and romantic. The sex scenes in Act 3 are insane. This is where we have the bear scene with Halsin, the squid scene, and no, I'm not going to show B-roll of those things. We can also bang Misora, Harlip, and the Drow twins, and did you know you can even have a foursome or a fivesome with the Drow twins and Astarion and Halsin? Of course, they couldn't bring themselves to actually animate that last one, but you get an idea. While these things are kind of fun, it's all pretty shallow. One of the things Larian really talked up in the marketing was that in other games, romance is treated as just do their quest and then get a sex scene, and how their romances are so much deeper than that. I agree it is deeper than that with the origin characters, but the romance with these extra characters in Act 3 is that shallow. So there are lots of quests in Act 3. Are any of them worth doing just to do? Yes, I'm glad you asked, because there is. Raphael's House of Hope is the best quest in Act 3. I know I've just been complaining about Act 3 this whole time, but I really love this quest, though it does have its issues. I also loved Andrew Wincott as Raphael, and I'm so happy he won a BAFTA. The devs also got to show how diabolical they can be because this quest starts out in the most evil way possible by having to rummage through your own inventory. But this quest absolutely crushes it on atmosphere. It's flashy, it's fun, it's chaotic, it's really disturbing. Breaking into the Devil's home to pull off the greatest heist of all time. What could possibly go wrong? It is everything I expected from Hell and more, and I had a ton of fun. The NPCs are also amazing.
The same place you'll find your sorry little soul when Raphael rips it out.
They're eating me from the inside. The rats. The rats. The rats. Ugh.
We're all mad here. But hope in hell? Why? That's the definition of insanity.
I loved exploring this area, learning more about Raphael and how he treats his guests, and generally how he conducts business. For example, you will learn that there is a room full of portals in his house that go all over Faerun. One of them is to Baldur's Gate. This is how he is able to be everywhere all the time at once. Remember this because I'm going to come back to it. You will also meet his personal incubus, Harlip, who looks just like him.
A lost little mouse is running through the house.
Oh, gods. What the fuck have I stumbled into?
A thief in the night, greedy and here to take. Why are you here, little thief?
And you have the option to kill him or, you guessed it, have sex with him in front of everybody. Now, when I think of things that might be considered a big deal, I feel like this would be up there. However, the devs at Larian would disagree with that. And this was the moment that I realized that nothing you did mattered in this game anymore. If you sleep with Harlip in front of everyone, your love interest will give you a very half-hearted line trying to get you not to, and that's it. This is also relatively new, by the way. Before February, none of the companions had a damn thing to say about it. This should be a relationship-ending event, at least with some of the companions like Gale. When you are done with Harlip, he will use your form on his other clients when he feels like it, and you will know when he does. I don't hate this concept, and I think it's pretty interesting, but the game does nothing with it. None of the companions will react about this except Astarion, and he just has a couple of lines about it. That's it. You'll never hear about it again. The benefit from sleeping with Harlip is that he will tell you that Raphael is not a good lover, and then he will give you the key to Raphael's safe, which has the password to either your contract or the hammer. So I guess it was worth it. Getting either of those things aggroes everyone, and now the challenge has started. You need to get across to the other side of the building where your portal is, fighting through all these mobs along the way. And do you remember the portal room we were in before? Well, it is actually closer to the archive than your own portal, so wouldn't it be awesome if we could just steal Raphael's shit and leave from his own portal and avoid most of these mobs? If we were in Act 1, I really think that would have been a possibility. But we are in Act 3. And yes, Hope did tell us earlier that the portals will not work for us. But in my party, I have a rogue, a wizard, and a barbarian very familiar with the Hells. You are telling me that not one of them could figure out how to get the Baldur's Gate portal working for us? It's just another example of how Act 3 has become so linear. The only way out is to fight Raphael in the end. I'm not saying the boss fight itself wasn't well done or not fun, because it was. And I'm not saying the song isn't on my repeat playlist, because it is! It's my favorite boss fight in the game. I just don't like that it's the only option they give you. What if I really wanted to pull off the greatest heist of all time? Or what if I wanted to recruit Raphael himself? The only option, once again, is everyone's dead. So what are the different outcomes of the House of Hope? Well, if you decided not to take his deal earlier and steal the hammer yourself, you can then show the hammer to Voss, who will be happy that now, since you are able to free Orpheus, he will give you the silver sword of the astral plane. But I think you should sell your soul to Raphael earlier in the game, because then you will get the hammer and the sword sooner. 10 out of 10 would sell my soul to the devil again. But when you kill Raphael, you'll also get the Helldusk armor. That's pretty good. And hopefully you have also pilfered the health amulet and the gauntlets as well. And these are all pretty good items, but honestly at this point in the game, these things just feel marginally better than whatever you already had. As I had mentioned before, there's also no repercussions really to sleeping with Harlip, no matter who your love interest is. And with Astarion, I can be convinced that yeah, he'd probably be alright with it, but Gale? Gale is probably the most monogamous character in the game, and I have a very hard time believing that he would be fine with it, especially when if you decide to get with Mizora, Gale will break up with you. It's ridiculous that they would have such severe consequences for cheating on your lover with one character versus another. So the only part of this quest that has an impact on the rest of the story is that by getting the hammer, you can now free Orpheus at the end. But I think they could have made this even more impactful. Raphael is Mephistopheles' son. Mephistopheles is an archdevil of the hells. Don't you think he'd feel some type of way that some punk-ass mortals literally snuck into his house, stole all of his shit, and killed him? I think it would have been so cool if Mephistopheles tried to take revenge on you at some point as a consequence. Like, maybe if you had a line with Gortash, then he convinces Gortash to go after you with him, or maybe Mephistopheles goes after everyone and tries to take the crown of Karsus back for himself. And another thing, if you are playing the Dark Urge, you learn that before the events of the game, you and Gortash worked together to sneak into Mephistopheles' home and steal the crown of Karsus to create the absolute hoax. So you're telling me that Mephistopheles would just let this shit happen again and do absolutely nothing about it? Now, Astarion's quest I was most excited for going into Act 3, and it is absolutely worth your time. And I'm not saying that just because I like Astarion. This is very much a character-driven quest which showcases Larian's amazing writing. It starts off right across the street from the brothel that starts Raphael's quest in the Flophouse. Interesting that they put the start of the two best quests in Act 3 right across the street from each other. Anyway, this is where you will really see the weight of the decision Astarion has to make, and throughout the moments of the quest, he is definitely leaning towards wanting to complete the rite of profane ascension and become the vampire ascendant. But in doing so, he will become everything he hates, essentially Cazador 2.0. You can have interesting discussions about this and push back on him, and he basically will like smooth talk his way into minimizing, sacrificing 7,000 people. You know how it is with him. Also, if you take too long in getting to Cazador's mansion, Astarion's brothers and sisters will come in the night to try to steal him away in one of the only long rest events in Act 3. And his brothers and sisters are laughably weak. Like, you really have to try to lose to get Astarion kidnapped here. If they take him, they have succeeded in creating some urgency at least. Exploring Cazador's mansion is interesting, although I do think they could have made the atmosphere look more special. I was picturing a castle much more ornate and gothic than what we got. The dungeon below is also odd because it's strangely futuristic and old at the same time. It really reminds me of the Isu temples in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You will also learn more about what Astarion's life was like here, which included things like him being kept in a kennel, and you will also learn about things he was forced to do while Cazador's slave. I'm not gonna lie, there is some real dark and heavy stuff here, but Neil Newbon's acting is absolutely phenomenal. So many feelings are brought up in Astarion from this. He's guilty about what he's done and angry that Cazador made him do it or would torture him. And he's so fearful about being controlled by Cazador again that becoming the vampire ascendant and killing 7,000 people to do it seems like his only option to be free. In his defense, there's definitely not 7,000 people there. There's like 10, but anyway. When you get to the boss battle, Cazador is conveniently looking in the other direction, so you can do a ranged sneak attack on him. The boss fight is pretty good overall. It's a little challenging and pretty satisfying when you kill everyone. However, once again, that is your only option here. Everyone needs to die because this is Grand Theft Auto. When you kill everyone, it doesn't matter what Astarion was wearing before the cutscene, he will always be shirtless for it. It's just canon.
For you. Wake up!
Then you can influence Astarion down one path or the other, or completely mess up, having him quote Cersei Lannister and leave the party. Influencing him to be better than Cazador is a beautiful end to a story because he finally learns that the best revenge is not being like him. If you are romancing him, you will get a very sweet scene with him, and it feels like he has really grown and changed into a better person. The rest of the game makes more sense if you go down the spawn route with Astarion, because he just continues to follow you around and does whatever you want. If you go down the ascended route, the rest of the narrative becomes a little wonky. So this is clearly his bad ending because he doesn't learn his lesson and just becomes worse. But it is fun. He gives this awesome villain speech, and to be honest, the game could use some good villains.
Everything will be ours. Everything. I already hear the world whispering in sweet surrender. And I feel alive.
You will also get a spicy romance scene with him later and become his vampire spawn. So what can Astarion do as an ascended vampire? He gets an ascended bite, which is basically his vampire bite but stronger, turns into mist, and does plus 1d10 necrotic damage to both unarmed and weapon attacks. And they are fine, but these things aren't really going to make a difference in combat at this stage. At this point, he has a totally new attitude and some different lines. I've heard Neil Newbon say that Spawn Astarion is theatrical while Lord Astarion is operatic, and I think that comes across very well. He is basically a totally different person. But is he really? He still follows you around and does whatever you want, and you can still send him back and swap him out for a different character, even though he is supposed to be apparently so possessive and controlling. Also, since he can apparently compel you, what if he actually did at one point? Like, what if at the end, if you were trying to save the day and blow up the brain, he compels you to take the power instead against your will? That would have been so awesome! But if you are his spawn, you can actually even bite him, and the game doesn't acknowledge it at all. A spawn biting their vampire master is a big deal according to this game.
Yes and no. The problem is, once you're a vampire spawn, they completely control you. They have to allow you to bite them. And why would they do that? Vampires are power-hungry creatures. They won't lose a servant to create a competitor. Trust me, it doesn't happen. Ask me anything, and it will be yours.
And he has already said at this point that he didn't want me to bite him yet, because they are trying to play up that he's a bad, controlling vampire man. But it completely destroys the immersion that you can just bite Ascended Astarion anyway. The game acts like nothing's changed. Now, quests that are fine doing once. I give Shadowheart's Act 3 quest a solid fine out of 10. It's decent to do once. Maybe it is more fun for you if you really like her. The Rockstar-like design is real here, though. It's just go to the spot on the map, have a boring conversation, have a battle, get a cutscene. You also get to see a copy-pasted atmosphere from Shar's temple. We love to see it. Shadowheart really had her big moment in Act 2, and this is just the aftermath. However, I think it is slightly more interesting if you do this with Dark Shadowheart. With the Selûnite Shadowheart, the only option is to murder all the Sharans, and that is her good ending, by the way. But with Dark Justiciar Shadowheart, she will try to have a coup and can convince some of the Sharans to join her cause. So the body count is actually lower with Shadowheart's bad ending, ironically. After the battle, you will learn that Shar has kept Shadowheart's parents hostage for years and would have Shadowheart torture them and make her forget. I mean, damn. By now, you've learned that Shadowheart comes from devout Selûnite parents and that Shar has been lying to her. Now, Shar wants her to kill her parents in one last sacrifice to become her right hand. Anyway, since on this run she was already lost in the sauce, I was curious to see what she would do without me nudging her one way or the other.
Don't call me that. My name is Shadowheart.
You are just lost, Genevieve. Selûne will show you the way home in time.
My name is
pray for, but still, this is real shit.
After this quest, regardless if you went with Selûnite or Shar in Shadowheart, not a lot has changed in the grand scheme of things. Again, you'll just get a different variation of the final cutscene and epilogue depending on which direction you went. It is a better story overall though if you went with Selûnite Shadowheart because she finally learns the truth and breaks away from her brainwashing, but what are you gonna do? Now on to things that were disappointing. The main problem is that there are no more urges in Act 3, which I know sounds like a bit of a weird sentence out of context. Baldur's Gate 3 really isn't great at building tension in general because you could just save scum your whole way through, but the tension of the Dark Urge origin was great! In Act 1, you now have another mystery to solve of who you are and why you have so many dirty thoughts, and sometimes, as you know, those thoughts turn into actions against the player's will. Sorry, Alfira. In Act 2, we have an interesting choice to make. The Dark Urge's butler wants us to kill Isabel, and in return we will get the Slayer form. If not, then he warns the Urge will return. If you don't kill Isabel, then you will try to kill your love interest, and you have to get the correct dice rolls not to. But if you do kill Isabel, you will condemn all of Last Light Inn, including the tieflings you may have saved earlier, and Jaheira. This is the peak Dark Urge for me. The stakes are high and the tension is thick.
I see. Sweet that you care enough to murder me. Mind if you don't?
And Act 3 has nothing like this for the Dark Urge. I already mentioned that they just reveal what's going on as soon as you get to Rivington, and that you are a Baal spawn, Baal being the god of murder. But the really disappointing thing is that the urge is solved already. There are no more urges, and nothing that your character wants to do that requires a dice roll to get out of, and it just feels like absolutely nothing is at stake and nothing matters. In fact, when you confront Gortash as the Dark Urge, he will reveal to you that actually you and him are best friends and develop the cult of the Absolute together. Your character doesn't remember because they were maimed by Orin. And how do your companions react to you actually being the villain of the story? Surely there would be some kind of consequence. Like at least one person would probably leave, right? Wrong. They actually could not care less. They'll just have a line to say at you, and then it's all forgotten like it never even happened. This is one of the most egregious forms of the companion reactivity not being there anymore.
So, it was you who got us into this mess. All along, we were traveling with the creator of the Absolute. I won't lie. I am a little impressed.
Now, as you go through the quest to track Orin down, you will be led to the Murder Tribunal, where you can confront Saravak, who is Orin's grandfather, and then you can either kill everyone or become an unholy assassin of Baal. So of course I went with the latter, mostly because I'm a little fatigued of all the killing we've done. And this just opens up a new vendor who has some decent things to sell you. After you defeat Orin, you get to decide if you are going to embrace Baal or not. And it doesn't matter if you have been embracing your urge, or whether or not you have decided to become an unholy assassin of Baal just moments ago, like I did. It will play out the same either way. In this playthrough, I decided to condemn all of Last Light Inn and got the Slayer form, and I became an unholy assassin of Baal. But I was still able to reject Baal at the very end.
Well done again on besting Baal and all that. It was very twee. Especially the part where that poor excuse for a skeleton waved his magic wand and made it all better.
Now I have a question for you. In all these side quests in Act 3, no matter if you are doing a good or bad playthrough, the objective is to go in there and kill everyone in the faction as we've seen. Now what is more Baal than that? You know what they say, once you cut the head off of Osama bin Laden, you're the terrorist now. You know, I was really rooting for Gale to do something awesome at some point during the whole game, and it just never happened. But it is impressive just how abysmal they were able to make Gale's Act 3 quest. He tells you at the end of Act 2 that he wants to get a book at a bookstore to learn more about the Crown of Karsus, the thing that is controlling the brain. Now, I thought it was going to be one of those situations that is like, we're just going to a bookstore, what could possibly go wrong? We're definitely gonna have some awesome battle where Gale is gonna show off some fancy magic. But instead, his quest evolves into walking through a hallway and having to open the correct doors, watching him read a book, then Mistra's spidey senses start tingling and she needs to talk to him immediately. Now you can either tell him to tell Mistra to shove it or ask for her forgiveness. And this decides Gale's ending. If you choose the former, he will become the god of ambition, and that is technically his bad ending, however, I feel like it's fine. Karlach's Act 3 content is straight up painful. She was sold into slavery into the Hells, had her heart replaced with an infernal engine, and now that engine is going to burn out unless she returns. Karlach is one of the most likable characters in the game, and it's just so disappointing that there is no saving her. I'll be honest, on my first playthrough, the two things I cared about the most was killing Cazador and saving Karlach, and was met with brutal disappointment when I got to the end and she burst into flames. I scoured the internet thinking I must have missed something, but her only options are to die or return to the Hells with you or Will, or become a mind flayer. You could try to make her feel better by getting revenge on Gortash, however, this just makes her feel even worse. Other quests in Act 3 involve wills, in which you can get him out of his contract, but then possibly condemning his father, then fighting this dragon under Baldur's Gate, and then the dragon happens to know the Mind Flayer, and then it turns out the Mind Flayer was actually like the founder of Baldur's Gate. You can also insert yourself into a race war with the gnomes, work with crotchety mermaids, and become murder mystery detectives because the talking elephant police don't want to do their jobs, and they are also being racist. Also, the Ballis did it, like, obviously. Do any of these matter in the grand scheme of things? Not really. So why is the last third of the game like this? Well, allegedly, in my opinion, they originally planned to take the game in a different direction, but had to cut a lot of content to ship the game out on time. On June 12, 2023, Larian posted a community update about the city of Baldur's Gate. In it, they say, giving you a chance to explore the menacing roads of the outer city, the opulent estates of the upper city, and the dark alleys and pubs of the lower city. I'm sure you've noticed, but we're not really exploring the opulent estates of the upper city. We just go there during the final battle at the end. In this post on Steam, it explains that there was actually a ton of content from the game that exists in the game files that were found from data mining. They include things like an entire upper city area and a whole Avernus area the size of the Underdark and quest lines that were cut. Most notably, Karlach's Act 3 questline, which included the ability to actually save her, and there are allegedly fully voiced lines from her indicating that her engine was fixed in the data files. I would pay so much money for a DLC in which we go to Avernus and save Karlach, but anyway, there were also storylines that were cut, including Cazador having a bigger role and potentially being able to align with him. Not like I could ever do that, but there was also Halsin having to do something with the Druid Circle in Act 3. Ketheric was able to actually be saved and join your party. And Minthara had a storyline that included her being pregnant. I was actually able to find data mine voice lines referring to this.
So, Minthara has one in the proverbial oven. I'm amazed you're still in one piece. I thought she'd bite your head off when she was done with you.
Larian then put out another statement on August 29th, 2023, addressing some of the data mine cut content. In it, and I'm paraphrasing here, they mentioned that some of it was ideas they did not envision in the final product, but some of the companion reactivity was not there due to bugs. Now in August 2024, during my last playthrough for this video, it does seem that they have added in some lines from the companions to placate the player, but in my opinion, the consequences and reactivity in Act 3 does not meet the bar of Acts 1 and 2 and still feels like an unfinished fulfilling experience. Larian also has a history of adding cut content back into their games after they have been out for a year with a definitive edition. So in my opinion, I think they did cut out more content than they let on in the post. And the ghosts of the cut content are everywhere. Have you noticed most of the loot is unusable vendor trash? Apparently there was also supposed to be a whole crafting section of the game to actually use this stuff, and the soul coins. There was a version of the game where you could actually exchange the soul coins for things in a furnace. And after the Guardian visits you a second time, have you wondered why some of your companions will say something like this?
I had another visit from that dream figure. I take it you did too. It claims that if we infiltrate the heart of the cult that's giving out these parasites, we'll find the answers we're looking for. It gave me another gift, too. Just like it did the first time it appeared. Rather generous, if you ask me.
It could be because originally the Guardian did actually give you something. And this line from the narrator after you use the Elithid tadpole for the first time.
You're a true soul. But my mistake, madam.
Something stirs deep within you, hungry and alert. It's taking something you'll never get back.
But then nothing happens. Using the tadpole powers originally were supposed to come with consequences, and the game makes it seem like there is going to be. However, it doesn't matter if you have used them or not, the game ends up the same. And why did they allegedly cut so much? One word: Starfield. Last year, before it launched, Starfield was going to be the game of the year. The hype train was real, and we know how that ended up. I think Larian wanted to release the game before Starfield came out, worried that once it launched, the hype around Baldur's Gate 3 would be over. So they cut out everything that wasn't finished and added quick band-aids on the current Act 3 quest to ship it out. This is also why the quests are so much more linear than in the previous 2 acts. Then they plan to release a DLC which would put all this content back in. But in March, they announced that they stopped working on the DLC and will not be making any DLCs or expansions or working with any Dungeons & Dragons titles again. So this is it. Or maybe when the next patch drops in September, they'll fix everything and this whole video will be irrelevant. Despite all these Act 3 issues, like I said, I'm a super fan and I love this game. I'm very excited for future Larian games and can just hope that the next one is even better. But I'm a little afraid that they might have learned the wrong lessons. Baldur's Gate 3 is their most popular game by far. It was 2023's Game of the Year, and for the most part, they have received nothing but praise. So front-loading the game and not finishing things at the end kind of just worked out fine for them. If you look at the Steam achievements, 52% of players made it to Act 2, 40% made it to Act 3, and then 22% actually finished the game. So you could look at that and think, most players don't finish games, therefore it's fine not to finish endgame content. Or maybe they are not finishing endgame content because it's not as good. Well, thanks for watching my first ever YouTube video ranting about Baldur's Gate 3. I'll still probably buy the next one.